Good morning, everyone, and welcome. All protocols are hereby observed. Welcome to today's webinar, jointly organized by IPSS and GIZ on the new African Union Continental Strategy for better integration of the border governance. This morning, we'll also look at how it relates to the African Union Agenda 2063. My name is Leti Tembolongwe, and I work as Interim Director for the Africa Peace and Security Program here at IPSS. I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. So this morning, we have two experts who will help us unpack the new continental border governance strategy in the nexus of the African Union Agenda 2063. We have Ambassador Fred Ngoga, who is the head of conflict prevention and early warning PSD AUC, and Mohamedou Abdul, who works on the GIZ AU border program. Good morning to both of you. Now, Dr. Jonas was supposed to be with us this morning. Unfortunately, he's out of town and he's having connectivity issues. So apologies on that aspect. But we'll start nonetheless. Perhaps, if I may start with you, Ambassador Fred, can you please help us unpack the new strategy? What does it entail for the African citizens, the REX, member states, and the African Union in general? Ambassador Fred, you have the floor, please. Ambassador Fred, please request to speak. You have the floor. IT, can you please assist Ambassador Fred?
Hello, Ambassador Fred. Can you please press on the request to speak button?
Okay, just continue assisting him. I'll just start with Mohamedou. I know in your program, aside from the African Union, you work a lot with stakeholders on the ground. Can you decode for us now what the current border disputes are on the ground? Where are the sticking points and why? In your analysis during the course of your work, what are the current border disputes on the ground? Mohamedou, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. Thank you. Before coming to the issue of border dispute, allow me to say 2 words about the African Union and the borders in general. What is the agenda of the African Union in borders? In fact, from the bilateral and multilateral relation perspective, the OAU first and the AU after interest in border issues is deeply rooted in the perception or even in the conviction that borders are a very sensitive and a potentially very conflicting subject. This is a basis where lies the agenda of the African Union, the OAU, the Organization of African Unity first, and the African Union regarding the borders. And this explains the fact that for a long time, the decision-making bodies of the continental institution have reflected and acted in the field of borders with a view to prevent, manage, and resolve the conflict related to them. We will recall the resolution of July 1964, which by consecrating the inviolability of the borders inherited from the colonization, that reaffirms the solemn declaration containing in the Charter of the OAU, calling on all member states to respect the borders as they existed at the time of the independence. This principle of international public law, known as uti possidetis juris, is, with regards to borders and territories, allowed by the agreements to preserve the territorial integrity of states and preserve their sovereignty. And this instrument is really an important one for the stability and a legal basis for settlement of border dispute. In fact, the head of state and government have put also in place mechanisms regarding border conflict for managing them and resolving them when they arise. This is why the OAU created ad hoc mediation committees in the early 60s. When conflicts arise, they made the head of the state put in place really ad hoc mediation conflict composed by head of high-ranking political officials, including head of state, to help the conflicting countries to resolve their conflict. We can give an example in the conflict between Ethiopia and Sudan in 1970s, or between Libya and Chad in 70s, from the 1970s to the 1990s. And during this conflict, and there are other conflicts also, they set up ad hoc committees, and which regularly inform the Assembly of Head of States and Government on the progress made in the resolution of these conflicts. And sometimes also, like in the conflict between Senegal and Mauritania, they set up interministerial committees to help resolving their border issues. And this political agenda on borders will continue to be recalled on a regular basis by head of state and government. And it demonstrates that it is really an interest they take, in the issue of border conflict. Thus, 1986 resolution of the Minister on Peace and Security in Africa reiterates the principle of negotiation settlement of border dispute. In 2002, the Protocol on Security, Stability, Development and Cooperation in Africa commits member states to continue to work on the delimitation and demarcation of borders as a factor of peace, security, and economic and social progress. And in 2007, the AUC received, January 2006, the AUC received the mandate from the head of state and government to continue its effort for the structural prevention of conflict, including through the implementation of the African Union Border Program. Well, we can say that from these examples and from these recommendations, we can say that the policy of the Organization of the African Union and the African Union in matters related to the borders has been fundamentally guided by the question of prevention, management, and resolution of conflict, which are based on the principle of the inviolability of the inherited border from the colonization, the negotiated settlement of border dispute, and the commitment to continue to delimitate and to demarcate the borders. But with the development of the African Union border governance strategy, we can see a kind of paradigm shift. This paradigm shift, while still continuing to have a key interest on conflict prevention and resolution, there are another dimension related to the borderland development and to even having borders as spaces where to implement the continental and regional policies. And this is also shown is in the ministerial declaration, which in their declarations, ministerial in charge of borders declarations. They have a declaration in 2007, another one in 2010, another one in 2012, and another one in 2016. And these declarations were the basis have done after their meeting, where they review the progress made in the implementation of the African Union Border Program, and recommend also make a recommendation for its development and its deepening. And in this declaration, they talk about the need to put in place a new form of pragmatic border management aimed at promoting peace, security, and stability, but also at facilitating the integration process and sustainable development in Africa. In another declaration, they reiterated the need, given the current challenges of integrated border management, to tackle in a holistic way the development and the security challenges in border areas. This evolution reflects, as I said earlier, a paradigm shift that is formulated in the African Union strategy for border integrated border management. In its conception and its structure, the strategy takes borders as the places where continental and regional policies can find an anchor and a site of operationalization. The African Union border governance strategy touches on several areas of these continental and regional policies and frameworks that it proposes to domesticate in border zones. It therefore constitutes an instrument for the implementation of policies and, for example, policies related to the pastoralism, to the nature and to the natural resources management, to the management of the maritime spaces, to the establishment of peace, security, and stability, and to governance of the creation of infrastructures, or even to facilitate the free movement of people. All these policies can be implemented, and other policies of course, because these are only an example, can be really implemented in border zone, and this is to promote peace and security and to facilitate or deepen the regional integration process at the same time. Therefore, the mission of the strategy is to develop a shared and inclusive governance of borders that contributes to the achievement of the objective of the African Union Agenda 2063. The agenda is organized in a way to be a framework for coordination and implementation of these policies at continental, regional, and national levels. It offers a recommendation covering the creation and shared management of structure, the establishment of identical procedure on both sides of the borders, the realization of a joint capacity building initiative, and the common allocation of basic social services in the borders. The guideline of the strategy then provide strategic, institutional, and organizational and operational guideline recommendation to implement the continental policies. Now, allow me to give some example of implementing these policies in, for example, in the different level. The first example I wanted to highlight is regarding the current border dispute, as you mentioned, Madam Moderator. In fact, Pillar 2 of the strategy relating to conflict prevention and securitization of borders and cross-border area invite member states, regional economic communities, and the AU to establish a solid framework for a peaceful settlement of conflict, to institutionalize preventive diplomacy, to foster cross-border cooperation and promote transnational security. One of these, the specific objective of this pillar is to prevent, manage, and solve conflicts. Prominent among this recommendation is that the state, based on the agreement of all concerned parties, refer border dispute to the attention of the AU's panel of wise, or call upon the AU or the regional bodies or international bodies of preventive diplomacy, mediation, arbitration, and conflict resolution for a peaceful settlement of the border-related dispute. This is a call to use really the AUC and the AU framework to solve that problem, and it has been called upon the AUC have called upon the member state on several occasions to refer to these mechanisms. Now, within the framework of the implementation of the African Union Border Program, several initiatives have been taken in the field of prevention, management, and resolution of border conflict. For example, the African Minister in charge of border issues recommended in their declaration, the last declaration in 2016, that the member state to strive to make use of diplomatic means in settling their differences and disputes on the course of their boundary before taking recourse to judicial mechanism, as I said earlier. And even the Peace and Security Council has regularly taken great interest in the issue of border conflict and border resolution of the border dispute. It's in its meetings held in 2016, 2018, 2019, and 2020 on the review of the progress made in the implementation of the African Union Border Program. The Council recalled that the primary responsibility of finding solution to the border dispute lies with the member states. In this regard, the Council urged the AU member state in resolving their dispute to promote the spirit of dialogue, negotiation, reconciliation, and promotion of peaceful resolution of disputed border, and judicial or arbitral action should be a last resort. In another session, the Peace and Security Council underlined the need for the AU to create a long-term mechanism and mandated the AUC to facilitate studies and resolve existing body in Africa and develop a roadmap providing guidance on ways and means to prevent further border conflict on the continent. The Council recommended also the AU Commission commended the AU Commission for the effort being deployed and progress already made in delimitation and demarcation, promotion of cross-border cooperation, provision of capacity building support to member states, with a view to preventing interstate border conflict and promoting peaceful resolution of all existing border disputes in the country. They also stressed the importance of member states for the member states to make use of the facilitation provided by the AU border program. And now what the AUBP, the program, has done regarding the border dispute. The AUBP has launched an initiative to document current border conflict in the continent. Regional studies are being carried out. The first study on Eastern Africa is almost completed, and a study on Central Africa is about to be launched. This initiative is supposed to cover all the African regions. The idea is to document the current border dispute, and the results of these studies will be submitted to the decision-making bodies of the African Union Commission and the conflict mediation and resolution bodies of the AU. The objective of this study is to provide them with relevant information and accurate knowledge on current border dispute to enable them to perform their mandate and work in facilitating the resolution of this dispute. This is regarding what is being done regarding the dispute. Now, among also the objective of this briefing is a link between border governance and the integration agenda. And this is a second example I will say 2 words about. And the relationship of border governance to regional and continental integration is demonstrated in 2 pillars of the strategy. The pillar on mobility, migration, and trade facilitation, and the pillar on cooperative border management. These 2 pillars contain recommendations for the establishment in border area of production and trade facilities, on creation of joint infrastructure in this zone, on reduction of mobility restriction, and on strengthening intra-services and inter-services cooperation. These things allow border areas to make trade more fluid, and to create conditions to accelerate the process of regional integration at the continental and the regional level. And the example also I can provide is experience of the AUBP in supporting rights and the member state in the field of the one-stop border post. Particularly, its support have been given to the East African community, and through the development of training criteria, curricula on operationalization of the one-stop border post. And after development of the training criteria, the trainings have been provided to the one-stop border post personnel. And in fact, the strategy sees one-stop border post as an essential tool for strengthening and revitalizing the integration process, while at the same time helping to establish good neighborly relations between neighboring states. One-stop border posts are also expected to do much to make the continental free trade area effective, which will create a single continental market for goods and services, and we hope later to establish a continental customs union. In this perspective, it is essential that the AUBP helps member states to further harmonize their procedures and regulatory framework in the borders. And the third objective of this briefing was to also talk about the mechanism on interrelation between member states, regs, and AU, and the partners in implementing the strategy. In fact, the implementation of the strategy is linked to the Agenda 23, in particular to its 10-year plan. The first plan is running until 2023, and another plan of 10 years will be set up for the achievement of the Agenda 2063. And clearly, the strategy says it is really linked to this planning. And based on the principles of the subsidiarity and complementarity, and those of primary responsibility of the state and on the participation, the strategy set out the roles and responsibility of each of the stakeholders. In a summary, the member states have the role to implement the strategy within their common borders. The regs facilitate its implementation as well as facilitate also consultation and dialogue between member states. And the AUC is responsible for the overall coordination and supervision of the implementation of the strategy. And the partners, yeah, like usual, they can provide technical and financial support for the implementation of the strategy. And in this regard, the AUBP has already developed a rollout plan of the strategy. And this rollout plan has some activities, information dissemination, sensitization of the sensitization on the strategy is one of the aspects of this rollout plan. Sensitization of member states on the African Union border governance strategy. Establishing also interdepartmental task force on the strategy, and establishing an AUBP REX task force on it, and developing and monitoring and evaluation framework, and supporting member states upon their records in developing and implementing national border strategies. These are the key elements of this rollout strategy that is will be deployed to implement the African Union border governance strategy. And before giving back the floor, I have to highlight this, as you can imagine easily, all this implementation of this strategy needs really a lot of resources, human, financial resources. And this is where maybe I appeal to the African Union and African Union Commission to put more resources and to give to the border program more attention, because it is an important program that will really contribute to the attainment of the objective of the Agenda 2063, and maybe to build also the Africa we want. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohamedou, for that detailed outline. And just one follow-up question from your presentation. Now, despite all these good measures and mechanisms put down by the African
Hello,
Union,
the moderator. Is this
Rex,
Leti? Can you hear me? I think I've managed to log in. Can you hear me?
Yes, Ambassador Fred. Yes, I can hear you. I'll give you the floor just now. Just a follow-up question to Mohamedou. Mohamedou, I was saying that despite all these good measures and mechanisms put down by the African Union and member states, border disputes.
Hello, the moderator. Can you hear me?
Ambassador Fred, I can hear you. Yes, we can hear you. We can hear you. I'll give you the floor just now. Yes, so what are the root causes of these border disputes? Mohamedou?
Yeah.
Yes. Can you just give us an idea? What are the root causes of these border disputes? Why do they still continue? Over to you.
Yeah, thank you, moderator. Yeah, in my view, the border disputes, yeah, can have many causes. Some of these disputes are related on the boundary line, where the boundary line lies, and if two states didn't agree on this boundary line, it can lead to border disputes, and generally it leads to. But the other causes, and the one we see usually now, is really related to the natural resources, access, exploitation, and control of the natural resources. When, for example, we see these kind of conflicts in maritime boundaries, where it is supposed there is some natural resources in the sea, And we have seen an example between Somalia and Kenya, which is one of them, but there are many, many others. Even in the lake boundaries, there are some lakes in Africa where it is thought that there are resources and there are some conflicts related to the boundary on the lake zones. And yeah, other kind of causes are also the claim of territories. Yeah, some member states can not agree on the. They can agree, for example, of the most of the boundary line, but in some territories, if the delimitation of this boundary from the colonial period is not clear, they can that can lead in conflicts. We are facing this kind of conflict in, for example, the Senegal and Mali's Mali border, regarding a small zone where also there are supposed to be some resources, gold. These are for the main causes of this conflict are these two things. Thank you.
Thank you, Muhammadu. Just one last follow-up question. What is your program doing to mitigate against these disputes?
Yeah.
What activities are you implementing on the ground? Over to you.
On the ground, the first activity that the program is supporting is the delimitation of demarcation. The limitation of demarcation as a boundary is done to really prevent the is a mean of structural prevention of conflict. When the two countries agreed on where the boundary lines lies, there are it's a good thing that will allow them to avoid to be conflictual, because now each country know where is sovereignty is its sovereignty ends. This is one of the aspects, and in the delimitation of demarcation process, over 25 member states are now involved on exercises. It's a very, very long exercise from the delimitation process, going through the documents, giving the proof of the boundary line, and after that going on the field, putting the beacons. It's really a very, very long process. And during this long process, the two countries expert, they know each other, and they discuss things between them, and even in meeting on a regular basis, discussing the delimitation demarcation is a kind of preventive diplomacy, because they can solve a lot of problems related to the common borders by these meetings. The other aspect, even we support also the cross-border cooperation between the two countries. A cross-border cooperation also, when the countries share the common initiatives, common project, and it give a little room for border conflicts. And there is a common by having, for example, the same facility, sharing the same facility, it's really deepen and strengthen the good neighborly relations between border communities, and between border officials, and between the two states. And as I said, this also initiative to mitigate is the documentation of the border current dispute, and putting this result in the hands of the mediation, African Union mediation organs, is really the activity we are engaged in also right now, in trying to help the resolution and mitigate the border dispute. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. I'm sure there's so many questions on the floor. We'll come back to you later. Ambassador Fred, I see you are on the floor. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Perhaps you, from your perspectives, you can unpack the new border governance strategy for us, and then let us know what does it entail for African citizens, REX, member states, and the African Union in general. Ambassador Fred, you have the floor. Over to you. Hello, Ambassador Fred, can you hear me? Ambassador Fred, can you hear me? Ambassador Fred? IT, can you assist, please?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Please go ahead. You have the floor.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, but the question is, can you hear me? Ambassador Fred? IT, can you please help?
Yes, Letty, we're trying to call him now.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Ambassador Fred, I can hear you. We can hear you.
Can
You
you hear
have
me?
the floor now. Yes, we can hear you. You have the floor. Can you hear me?
I don't know. I'm not sure if you can hear me, but I can't hear you. But if you please make send me a message and say that you can hear me, because I'm having a difficult time with this platform.
Okay, we can hear you. Let me just send you a message.
Fine. I'm going to assume that actually you can hear me. I'm going to be very short because I think Abdul has said quite a lot, and I have unfortunately another meeting to attend in a few minutes. But I just wanted to thank IPSS for convening this important discussion on the AU border governance strategy that we are planning on rolling out quite soon, actually, within the regional economic communities and then our member states. I won't go into the genesis of the background. I think he has mentioned it all. But what I wanted to do at this point, I wanted just to highlight some of the key pillars of the AU border governance strategy, talk to you a little bit about how this relates to the Continental Free Trade Agreement, and also on how we plan on engaging our member states in this regard. So if you allow me just a few minutes, let me highlight some of the key highlights of our border governance strategy. We have it has about 5 pillars. The pillar number 1 is development of capabilities for border governance. The reason why this pillar is important is because we have realized that in many of our countries, we do not have actually the capacity to actually look at border issues because it's quite technical. And some countries you will find, for example, that they have the matters that are managed by borders. They are in the ministry, in the president's office. Some are in the Ministry of Interior or elsewhere. So in different places. So one of the number 1 priority for us was to ensure that we can help our member states to develop their own border capacity. Second pillar, which is quite important for us, has to do with conflict prevention and resolution and border security and transnational threats. So this is quite important. We are actually actively involved right now. And as I speak to you, we will soon be having actually a meeting between Sudan and South Sudan. We have been actually we have also offered to assist on the Ethiopia and Sudan border disputes. But for that to happen, what you always need both countries actually to come to you, and it has to be a joint request. And before we can assist with technicalities, we need first of all the countries to agree politically. And so far, the discussions are ongoing. We are not there yet, but we stand ready to assist whenever the two member states will come to us and ask us to do so. This is also important in the fight against terrorism. What you need is you do need cross-border cooperation. Here I have in mind, for example, the situation in Mozambique, where you have links between, where you have Tanzania and Mozambique who are working together. So these are some of the things that are quite important. And in fact, also you have cross-border cooperation on matters related to the fight against drugs or human trafficking and things like that. So this is going to be quite important, and we are planning to roll it out in all our member states. So the other issue that is quite important for us is mobility, migration, and trade facilitation. As you are quite aware, one of our ambitions on the continent is to allow free movement of people and goods, and also the Continental Free Trade Agreement. And so these are some of the things that we're going to be working on, and this is a pillar that will actually meet our aspiration as part of the Agenda 2063. The other one that we have is cooperative border management. We want our institutions to work together, because if they don't work together, it doesn't work. Let me give you an example. For example, in the fight against COVID, if you look at the different measures that have been put in different countries, they are not always the same. And particularly in the border area, you will find here, for example, that countries that are not very well organized, or that doesn't have the same understanding of how to manage their borders, have been affected differently. If you look into many of African countries today, you will notice that the border areas have been the ones the most affected. So we do need to make sure that there is some sort of standardization, some sort of agreement on how to manage our borders and how to cooperate. Then we have the issue of borderland development and community engagement. This one is important. I think the people who live in the borderland are often neglected, yet they get the brunt of whether it's climate change, whether it is crime, whether it is many things. They're often left out. And so what we want to do is we want to bring them in, engage them, but also make sure that they participate quite well in building their towns, or even having joint projects with the neighboring countries. Here, I have in mind the situation, for example, between Mali and Burkina Faso, where we have actually helped the communities to build a hospital that benefits both countries and both communities in the border areas. So these are some of the 5 pillars of our AU border governance strategy that we plan on rolling out. And all these strategy priorities are interrelated, and the enhancement of border governance on the continent requires all of them to be addressed. So I think I would just stop here because of time, but I just want to give you some numbers just before maybe I can take a few questions. Africa covers 6% of the total surface area and 20% of the total land area of Earth. Our coastline, the African coastline, including its islands, is about 40,036 kilometers. It is a continent hosting 109 terrestrial international boundaries of a total length of more than 170,000 kilometers. Although member states have demonstrated significant progress in the delimitation and demarcation of interstate boundaries, only 35% of the continent's boundaries have been demarcated. And this is important because we have set normally our deadline 2022 to have completed actually the limitation and demarcation of all our boundaries. But obviously, it doesn't look like we will be able to meet that target, and we will need to request our member states actually to extend that deadline again. But this is important, particularly as we are going to embark on the CFTA and as we deal with issues related to climate change, which often causes disputes. So I will just like to stop here because time is it was not on our side and we had a problem with the platform. But I want to take I would like to take a few questions that I would like to answer before I can go, because unfortunately I have another meeting.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Ambassador Fred. We have a couple of questions on the floor, but before we get to that, I just I can just underscore that I just heard you say that you won't be able to meet the deadlines that have been set. In that case, would you say the mechanisms of cooperation between member states, the African Union, REX, and partners in the implementation of the strategy are the best suited ones? And then if you can answer that, and then I'll quickly go to the questions that have been posted to the chat so that we can take advantage of your presence before you depart to help us understand what is going on. Over to you, Ambassador Fred. Ambassador Fred, can you hear me? Hello? Ambassador Fred? Hello? Mohamedou, maybe perhaps you can respond to the question that I just posed from your end. Would you say, since you're not going, you said, Ambassador Fred, that said that the deadline is not unfortunately going to be met, would you say then that the mechanisms of cooperation that have been put in place are the right one in the implementation of the strategy? Mohamedou, you have the floor, please.
Yeah, thank you, the moderator. Yeah, I think, obviously 2022 will not be met. The target will be met to delimitate and demarcate all the African boundaries. And in fact, the first deadline was in 2017. And after that deadline, it has been extended to, it was first in 2012. And after extended to 2017, and after extended to 2022. I guess it will be also extended because, as I said earlier, the process is very long, and the demarcation of the boundaries costs a lot. And I think, it will be extended, and the member states are already engaged, and they really wanted, most of them really wanted to delimitate and demarcate their boundaries. I think the mechanism put in place will remain and will continue to continue to delimitate and demarcate their border, and at the same time to develop also cross-border cooperation initiatives. I have no doubt that it will continue.
Thank you so much. Yes, go ahead, please.
There is a question on the legal implications for the member states. In fact, the African Union border governance strategy is not binding. The member states are not obliged to adhere to it or to implement it. It is even stated on the strategy that really it is not binding, and it gives a member state guideline, and they are requested or invited to use this guideline, and so to the African Union member state have the same orientation and the same line of actions in implementing the policies related to the borders and boundaries.
Thank you, Mohamedou. And just a follow-up question. In your analysis of the data on the ground, are you recommending practical solutions and approaches to the African Union and member states? Over to you.
Sorry, come again.
I was saying, in your analysis, Ambassador Fred gave us some data earlier on. In your analysis of that data on the ground, are you recommending, through your program, that is, are you recommending practical solutions and approaches to the African Union and member states? Over to you.
A practical solution on which domain?
On which to the African Union and member states, because you are working on the ground as well, and you are in possession of data on the ground. So based on that, in your analysis of that data, are you also in your work recommending practical solutions and approaches to the African Union and member states?
Yeah, the overall implementation of the African Union border program is practical. The way it is set up is really implementation of the program from by the member state, supported by the regional economic communities, and the overall program is coordinated by the African Union border program. There is an interaction and the support also of the partners like GIZ. There is an daily interaction between this level, interaction, sharing experience, and when problems arises, finding solution, discussions, and yeah, I think it's really the three levels of intervention are interconnected and interrelated, and they are working together to face problems when they appear and try to solve them. Even the member states also can directly touch to the RECs or to the member state. For example, to give you an example, recently in the conflicts between DRC and Zambia regarding their border, and SADCs intervened. SADCs were leading the helping to find solution. Is African Union Commission supported SADCs on that, and the partners provided facilitation to the technical teams to go on the field, assess the situation in the field, and this is a way also the different stakeholders involved in this program work together to find a solution to the problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohamedou. IT, if Ambassador, we still have Ambassador Fred, if you can just call him and perhaps just pose those questions that are on the chat box so that he can respond to some of them. But in the meantime, I'll just go ahead with Mohamedou, who's on the floor. Mohamedou, I don't know if you've seen the questions that have been posted on the floor. One of them is from Berhanu, and Berhanu is asking, has the African Union done anything about the existing border dispute between Sudan and Ethiopia, which has escalated to military confrontation? Over to you, Mohammed, and Ambassador Fred.
Thank you. Yeah, regarding this question, in his presentation, Ambassador Fred said that they are willing and to support in this solving this issue. I think it's a question for him. Me as a technical advisor and supervisor, and don't have really the information that what have been done in diplomatic and political action that the AUC has already taken, but I suppose that there are actions taken by the African Union Commission or even the African Union at the decision making level to support the two countries to find a peaceful solution to their border conflict. Maybe if Ambassador Fred comes back, he can give more detail on this issue.
Thank you so much, Mohamedou. I'm sorry for putting you on the spot. We seem to be having connectivity and time issues. Perhaps Ambassador Fred will communicate with us so that he can help respond to some of these questions. But I have a second question here on the floor from Issa, and Issa's concern is that the African Union, despite having all the good agendas and most of it, some of it, you may agree with me, it's rhetoric, which end up on the shelves without being implemented. My question is, why does the African Union fail its a future generation, that's the youth of the continent, vis-a-vis this topic? Over to you, Mohammed.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think this kind of questions needs responses from the African Union Commission itself, not from the partners. Yeah, I don't have really a clear response of on this question. If there is a failing of the African Union, or is the African Union doing things but it doesn't meet the expectation of the African people? I think this debate is between between them and the African Union Commission or the African Union itself.
I understand, Mohamedou. I think it's unfortunate we didn't have the representative from the African Union, and perhaps Ambassador Fred can best respond to that question when we get hold of him. But there is another question for you from Romani, and he's asking, does the new strategy have any legal implications for member states? Are they obliged to implement or adhere to it? Can you clarify?
Yeah, I already responded to this question. Now there is no really an obligation. As I said, the African Union Border Governance Strategy is implementation is not binding for the member states, and it is clearly stated in the document. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm told Ambassador Fred is gone for another meeting, so that leaves you on the floor. I have another question, follow-up question from Issa, and Issa is asking, are deadline extensions of border corporations lack of political will on the side of the AU leaders? Yeah.
No, I think regarding the extension of the borderline, and there is not really a lack because of political will, because there is successive extensions of this deadline. The fact is that, as I said, the process of delimitation demarcation is really long, can be very, very, very long, and it costs a lot, and most of the member states has not really means and to implement the process, delimitation and demarcation process very quickly. It really takes time to go through the process, and sometimes also when there are some disagreement or misunderstanding, the process can stack for a long period of time before it's move again. That's why you cannot meet the deadlines of 5 years to complete the delimitation of demarcation of all African boundaries. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. So you do attest that the political will has got nothing to do with it. It is there from member states.
Yeah. It's not because they are engaged. The political will, if it was a problem of recruitment, most of them will not be engaged on the process of delimitation and demarcation. They are engaged, as I said, almost half of the African member states are currently in a process of delimitation demarcation, and all the member states are requesting support to be included in the program. So it's not, for me, in my view, a problem of political will regarding at least the deadline and the achievement of the completing the process.
Thank you so much for that response, Muhammadu. I think on the floor I see another question, which I'm sure you'll be able to respond to. And Constance is asking if in the new organogram of political affairs, peace and security, where does the AUBP program sit in the new organogram? Are you able to tell us where the program that you work for is situated in the new organogram? Over to you.
Even I think the AUBP is not clearly reflected in the new organigram, but during one of their meetings, the Executive Council have been asked by member states where the program sits, and the response was that the issues related to border conflict resolution sits under the regional offices. This is what have been what is in the documents for the time being. Thank you.
No, thank you so much. Colleagues, I further open the floor for questions, comments, and inputs. So feel free to either request to speak or post your question to the chat box. The floor is open. Okay, as we go along, Muhammadu, I had one question from my end. Would you also indicate if the member states, the mechanisms that have been put in place, all the good mechanisms that you're working towards to will be able to contribute to regional and continental integration and towards towards the attainment of the Agenda 2063, as you mentioned, you alluded to earlier on in your presentation. The other component of this briefing session is to unpack if the new strategy and its mechanisms will be able to actually contribute to regional and continental integration and the attainment and contribute towards the attainment of Agenda 2063. Over to you, Muhammadu.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think in my view, the provisions and the guideline recommendations reflected in the strategy really can contribute substantially in deepening and enhancing the process of continental and regional integration. But this can be done. Even here, we need really a commitment of all the stakeholders and a political will from the decision-making organs of the AU to put borders as the anchor and to put it as the main backbone where they can implement the continental and regional policies. If there is a commitment on that, and a political will to do that, I think the borders and the border governance strategy can contribute really substantially on the process of regional integration, because borders are where there are bottlenecks, but borders also are where really we can facilitate a lot of movement, free movement of goods and people, and borders are the places where two member states or three member states can really join their effort to build something and to share infrastructure, to share procedures, to share, to work together really toward deepening the regional integration. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohamedou. Indeed, we need that a goodwill as well as the regional and continental integration to succeed, more especially now in the wake of the African continental trade area that came into place beginning of this year. Otherwise, the continent, the African Union, is planning to fail. So we do need that regional and continental integration to succeed. Are there any questions on the floor? Comments, questions on the floor? Please
Hello.
request to speak.
Hello, good morning. May I make a comment?
Go ahead, please. You have the
Okay.
floor.
So, good morning, and I am Nazrul Islam. I am ambassador of Bangladesh. So, first, let me take this opportunity to thank IPSS for organizing this such an important event for me. At least, I am new here, so it is a pleasure to be part of this initiative. So, from my point of view, what I may add is that you probably also know that in our part of the world, in the Indian subcontinent, we are also part to the colonial legacy of the disputed border, like border problem between India Pakistan, border problem between India and China, border problem between India and Bangladesh. So we had very complicated and complex border problems in our part of the world also. And like Mr. Muhammad also mentioned, that we had problems with the maritime delimitation, and we had a lot of enclaves in each other territory. Like Bangladesh had around 700 or 800 enclaves, and India had around 1,000 enclaves in Bangladesh. So what we tried to do, first we built up a national consensus. Without a national consensus, it is very difficult for any particular government to go forward to make any agreement, because probably if there is no national consensus, the opposition may not support it, and in the process they may jump in or take an excuse to demonstrate against the government. So first we built a national consensus, so that if we want to gain some territory, probably we have to give some territories. So we have to be prepared for that. So when we had built up that national consensus in Bangladesh and also in India, so then we went for the exchange of enclaves and also demarcation of borders. And probably one of the important cases of maritime delimitation in recent past is maritime dispute cases between India and Bangladesh and Myanmar. We went to UN arbitration, and they actually tried the case, and they gave verdict, and they delimited the maritime territory. So we, based on consensus, both India and Bangladesh, and also Bangladesh and Myanmar, all of us, we went to UN, so that there is no controversy and we can seal the verdict to the people and to the other political parties. So that's how we have overcome some of the border problems in our part of the world. But that could not be done between India and Pakistan, you understand. So that consensus is not there. So that's why, no government will be bold enough to take any decision, because that may even destabilize their position in power, because the people and the other political parties may not support it. So I think, I don't know, I mean, it's my humble observation that probably first you have to build a consensus to go for this compromise in your own nation. If there is a consensus and political will, probably then you can go. Otherwise, this I mean, arrangement will not be sustainable in future. You will have often border clashes and other things. And what we have found out, when the border is settled, you can have tremendous benefit for the people around the border, because they can go for local trade, they can go for barter and exchange. That we have found out. When the border is settled, we don't have to invest in the military and other border patrols. So we can actually take these resources for the benefit of the people. So that is my humble suggestion. I don't know about African theory because you are the expert, but probably building a national consensus before going for, I mean, direct border arrangement might be another option. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambassador, for sharing your perspectives from Bangladesh. Always useful to learn how others are doing it. I'm sure Mohamedou has taken some notes and will be able to share with others at the African Union. So thank you for that contribution. I don't know, Mohamedou, you wanted to respond to that? Mohamedou?
Okay. Thank you, Leti. Now it's worth the comment. I appreciate the comments of His Excellency and sharing with us experience in Asia. Yeah, I think there are a lot of common. There are similarities on the way our borders have been drawn, and the way also they are managed. Yeah, the same kind of conflicts and or mechanism of settlement of borders are in place. I know also, yeah, in some countries, like for example in Senegal and the Gambia, in the 1970s, Senegal gave back to the Gambia some villages, some territories. This kind of arrangement in the settlement of boundary conflicts is common also in Africa. And likewise in between Mali and Mauritania, and right now they are discussing. Mali is requesting that Mauritania give to them some part of the territory lying in the common border. Yeah, it's kind of a matter of negotiation and understanding between the countries. That's why the strategy insists a lot on the prime responsibility of the member states in settling the border dispute. This is an important thing also to mention. They are really responsible. It's their territories, their sovereignty. They have the prime responsibility, and there are many different kind of arrangement between member states to settle their border dispute. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohamedou. Ibrahim, just before I give you the floor to speak, I think it's important also to document the good border stories. And from my end, I experienced it between Mozambique and Malawi at Zomba, where they're just segregated by a road. You have women across each side of the road selling their merchandise, and you have pupils, going from Mozambique, just walking across to the Malawian side to go to school there or to go to the clinic there. So there are some good stories as well. Let's not just be talking about the quarrels and disputes that are there because of the natural resources and other issues. There are some good stories that are working. Now I'll give over the floor to Ibrahim Mohammed. You have the floor, please, to make your intervention.
Thank you for giving me the floor. And I'm Ibrahim from Sudan. Really, part of my contribution being covered by Brother Muhammad, and even by you yourself. You know, we all agree that the borders in Africa are just, we cannot call them borders, lying being drawn by colonials. And the local population never feels that they are borders. I recall a story. One of my brothers, he wants something to be brought from my country. I said to him, please let me help you to bring that thing. He said, no, Ibrahim. I have my brother working in your army. I will ask him to bring those things from Sudan. I said, oh, one family, part of them working in the army of this country and the others working in the army of the other countries. That is the feeling of the local population. I think if we back the idea of leaving those things for the countries and for the local populations to handle it, but not that will not excuse us not to put the marks on place. There should be a demarcation. This is the borders, but let it to be flexible to the maximum. That is my comment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. I don't know, Mohammed, do you want to respond?
Yeah, I agree totally with Mr. Ibrahim Mohammed, because the process of delimitation or demarcation doesn't mean that the border is closed or there is no, the relations are cut. The delimitation and demarcation boundary, it's, as I said, it can prevent conflicts between the two member states, and it really shows to a country and even to the border communities where the limits of territorial sovereignty lies in one country. And because it is not really putting beacons and delimitation border is not really closing the border. That's why the cross-border cooperation dimension is the second pillar of the African Union border program. And the cross-border cooperation is what Mr. Ibrahim Mohammed is referring to. Unfortunately, there is a convention that have been adopted by the African Union to facilitate the cross-border cooperation issue. And it's in all the dimensions. Even many of the member states currently, in West Africa mostly, developed a bilateral agreement on cross-border cooperation. There are legal instruments that have been developed in West Africa between many member states to launch cross-border cooperation initiative. Even at the very local level, between authority at the local, for example, municipality, from both parts of the boundary, there are protocols on cross-border cooperation in general, or one aspect of the cross-border cooperation. For example, they can decide to have a protocol on sharing a health facility or using water type. This kind of initiatives are ongoing on West Africa. And I think also, even in the past years, I think between even Ethiopia and Sudan, there were a cross-border cooperation initiative. There were a memorandum on cross-border cooperation deciding on the relation of border communities to share within a radius of 90 kilometers from the border, from the boundary line. Their communities were allowed to trade between themselves, and there is a certain amount of money they can exchange, they can cross with to the borderland. The issue is we can set this kind of protocols, but implementing them, sometimes the structures, the organs put in place to operationalize these mechanisms. Sometimes at the beginning they can work very well, but during the time, and there are some contrasts in really the functioning and the operationalizing of the structures. This is also one of the main contrasts in the cross-border cooperation initiatives. the functioning of the structures put in place is really a problem. Even in the delimitation demarcation, there are bilateral commissions. Sometimes they can work, and sometimes they are really not working. And this is also one of us aspect I think the African Union Border Program and the AU should focus on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohammed. Now I see there are a couple more questions on the floor, and there's one from Ibrahim. I don't know if this is the same one that he posed, but he's saying, I think the issue of borders was left very fluid by the African Union. They want to maintain the inherited borders, the ones drawn and Berlin, but we need a clear binding mechanism to settle the disputes. If things left to governments, it would lead to more conflicts. Mohammed, you want to respond to that?
Yeah. From the African Union Commission or the AU, it's really difficult to them to have a binding mechanism to settle border dispute. As the action of the AU and AUC on border dispute are really diplomatic and political measures. It's the first step on trying to help the member state to settle their border dispute. They take diplomatic and political measures through mediation, through arbitration, and if they don't succeed on that, the cases go to the ICJ, which has a binding, which decisions are binding. This is the way it works. But at the African Union, they cannot really have a binding mechanism. I don't think they can do it. A binding mechanism to settle border dispute. The binding mechanism as is ICJ, International Court of Justice.
Thank you, Mohammed. I think all these questions that are being posed today, we'll collect them and share them with you, so that in your conversations with the African Union, you may try to get some of the answers, because I think it's imperative, for citizens to know about some of these issues. There's another question from Issa. Issa is saying, okay, can you assist us to what do you think of Mozambique gas-related killings, Ethiopian conflicts, and DRC problems?
Yeah. As an expert of, I'm not an expert of border conflict. I'm expert on borders in general, and I'm supporting the African Union program in implementing it's a program on borders. And now my work is really technical advice to the African Union. But when it comes to political and diplomatic issue, it's on the AU or AU African Union Commission on the AU to deal with that. In the conflict, in these conflicts, I think the African Union is trying to do its best to support member states to settle them. Now, the African Union Commission, even the African Union, they cannot just jump and come and say they intervene upon request. As Ambassador said, if two countries are involved, the African Union Commission needs the request from the two countries to give its support. Now, I think also this question have to be discussed with the African Union, as I said earlier. Yeah, my role is really technical advice, and I don't deal with political and diplomatical issues. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Mohamedou. I totally agree with you. The issue of sovereignty for African member countries is really a big issue, and one can just jump in and try to resolve any conflicts that may be there. Having said that, there's another question on the floor from, who is this one from? I think from Behanu. He's asking, do you see any link between local communal clashes on resources emerging out into being a border dispute? Are there any studies so far, as in many countries, that there are clans of tribes living in another country? Do you also see transcending of conflict emerging out as interstate clashes? If you may respond to that, Mohammed, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think this kind of communal clashes or communal conflicts over resources is widespread in the continent, in the borderland, in the African borderland. We find them in all the African regions. These issues can lead to conflicts between the two member states, but also most of the time, this kind of conflict are really when these kind of conflicts happen, the two states quickly come together, sit and discuss the issues to solve them. It's not lead. It doesn't lead automatically to the clashes between the two states. I talked about the cases DRC and Zambia. This was from it. This conflict was appear from communal issues, and the SADC and backed and supported by the African Union helped the two countries to solve the problem. And afterward, the AU border program supported the technical mission on the ground to settle. This happened also between Senegal and Gambia, for example, where the communities are were in conflicts on territory. Each of the community, Senegalese and Gambian communities, claiming part of the territory because they wanted to access, since there is a demographic growth of the population in this border, the farming land were scarce, and each communities wanted to access the farming land. And the two countries also came up, went on the field, made a joint sensitization of the communities and requested from the communities to stay calm, and the issue is an issue to be settled by the two countries. And they decided to delimitate and demarcate the conflict, this area. It was an area of around 10 kilometers long. They decided to put beacons to really demarcate this area so that the problem is solved. Yeah, it can also lead it can lead also to really difficulties or conflict between the countries. But most of the time, within the framework of the African Union border program, when these kind of conflicts appear, there are mechanisms and that are put in place to settle them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that response, Mohamedou, and I totally agree with you on that one. I think there's another request from WO. They simply logged in as WO, and they're saying they have questions and comments. I don't know if IT you are able to get hold of them so that they can be on the floor and pose their questions and comments. IT, are you able to get hold of them?
Yes, Letty, I think he's having a problem with his internet. So we're waiting for him.
Okay. And there is also Wafula. but they never finished their sentence. Wafula, would you like to get on the floor? Can you request to get on the floor so that you can pose your questions or comments? IT, can you help? Okay, Mohammed, going forward, I had a question. What should member states, regs, and policymakers be focusing on? Of course, outside the usual rhetoric that politicians gives from time to time. What should member states, the African Union, and regs, and other policymakers, by the way, should be focusing on going forward? Over to you, Mohammed.
Thank you. Yeah, I think besides the rhetoric or because decisions and the all the stakeholders and regarding the implementation of the African Union border program border strategy, they should focus on really how to set up a real coordination and mechanism based on the principle of subsidiarity, a mechanism that works concretely and to focus on really to how to operationalize the best the strategy, because as I said, it's a really a good instrument to foster to deal with peace and security issues and to foster the regional integration. And this should be a commitment and engagement to concretely set up coordination mechanism and set up also a really realistic and feasible action plan on the field in the different domains. And this need also that all the states scholars can be on board and really implement the strategy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mohammed, for that response. Any further questions from the floor before I request Mohammed to give us his last takeaways? Any questions, comments? Mohammed, your last takeaways.
Yeah.
From this meeting.
Yeah, thank you, Letty. And first of all, I should have begun by that. Thank you for allowing me to present this strategy and to actually to have discussions with other experts and other colleagues. It was really a pleasure to exchange on this kind of issue and on the border matters in general. Yeah, the takeaway is really, for me, border zones are the places where we find a lot of bottlenecks, problems, constraints in Africa. And this is a place also where we can really develop things. If we can, if we act on borders, in the borderlands, and if we act jointly from both parts of the boundary line, and if we act jointly between all the stakeholders, meaning all the levels, the African Union level, the REX level, the member state level, the states level, the private sector level, all the stakeholders, the border communities, and there should be a huge alliance of African people on borders, because the borders are really the places for me where we can really transform this continent. And this is a place also where we can really reverse the tendency of the in French we say extraversion. Extraversion, I don't know the word in English. We can reverse the orientation of the trends of how we are running our economies, how we are running our, basing it on the borderland it's really can, as the president of Mali said, we can really heal our borders. We can we can make the borders really the places where we can transform our continent. This is my last word.
Thank you so much. I totally agree with you. I think for the new strategy to succeed, it needs the involvement, the inclusion, and full active participation of all stakeholders at national, at regional, and continental levels. Mohamedou, it has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your participation today. Colleagues, thank you so much for all your contributions and sharing your time with us. Indeed, great thanks to our two speakers. It's unfortunate Ambassador Fred was short of time, and he had some connectivity issues for some time for him, but at least he managed to share his perspectives on the topic, though briefly. This is where we leave it at, and going forward, IPSS is very much willing, Mohamedou, to work with you in terms of implementing evidence-based research, as well as developing policy briefs on the topic. We have now come to the end of today's webinar. Thank you so much for your participation, and enjoy the rest of your day. Goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.